kind of on the right side.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can see like the little black boxes, but you couldn't see the content. It was just a black box.
Okay. Well, hopefully this one will go a little bit smoother.
Yes.
It's like teaching multiple classes in the same content, right? Your first one is always kind of like trial by error, and then you're like, oh, I got this.
Yeah.
We're
Okay.
So if you could just tell me who's in the virtual room, just your first name, what grade level, maybe where you teach, where you're joining us from. I know this is mostly California teachers, but if you're from somewhere else, that'd be great to know too. And then I want you to kind of give me a visualization. Like when you hear the word hacker, what kind of images pop into your head? So we'll just wait for just a quick second. All right, so thank you, Coral. So person on a computer in a dark room, okay. What else? Oh, Lisa said a security breach. Stalker. Uh-huh. Oh, in familiar place. That's awesome. Thanks, Carolyn. Or Carrie, sorry. Oh, Angela, intelligent. Interesting. Oh, I love the fact that we have some elementary school teachers. You are my people. Hi. So great. What I'm going to share today is primarily focused for middle school, high school, but I used to do it with my elementary students. So I'm so glad. Oh, Sandra's here from fourth grade too. Awesome. So yeah, so what do you think when you hear the word hacker? Kind of what pops into your brain? Like what image? Thanks, Marco. Awesome. Great. I'll give it like one more minute. And then we'll jump in. A smart teenager, right? You need to capitalize on those smart teenagers. Excellent. Hacker intruder. Excellent. Well, thank you all. Thanks for joining me today on how to integrate some cybersecurity into your curriculum. So again, we kind of heard, right? Like we have this like image of a teenager. Generally speaking, usually when I ask people like, what's your image of a hacker? It's pretty gender specific that it's male. So we have somebody like in a hoodie, like in a basement, like on their computer. I always think of the picture in the right-hand corner, like anonymous, where they're like the Robin Hood of the technical age today, where they're going after what they can perceive as like the bad guys and kind of like thinking about hacking. We also kind of think about the code, like coding and language. And then there's me. Hi. So I'm going to give you a little PSA in just a second. So my name is Svea Anderson. I taught science. I've taught all elementary school, middle school science for 23 years. In 2021, I was selected as an Albert Einstein Distinguished Educator Fellow. If you don't know about the AEF program, I strongly recommend that you look into it. It's amazing. They pair classroom or STEM and science and math teachers with federal agencies. Or the Hill. So we have fellows at NASA, we have fellows at USGS, the US Geological Society. We have them in Congress, right? So you can go to the Hill. I was the inaugural fellow at the Department of Homeland Security, and I worked under their cybersecurity branch, CISA. And I had no background in cyber. And when I asked my leadership, oh, why, why me, right? They were like, oh, because you've taught all these different grade levels and you can deal with chaos. And so it was awesome. But it was an incredible 11 months of my life. I worked on K-12 policies and procedures. I reviewed K-12 cybersecurity curriculum. I worked on a congressional mandate for K-12 schools and ransomware and what to do, like offering solutions. So it was a really incredible opportunity for me to dive deep into cybersecurity and knowing what I knew from kind of my classroom experience, how to kind of implement it into curriculum and to encourage others to integrate it into their curriculum. Have I been pawned? I have a little link here. It does not look like a legitimate website, right? Because it like is missing the A, but if you click on, or if you go to it, it will show you all your digital footprint, basically, if your identity has ever been leaked or if there's been any hacks. So I go back to 2012, where my information has kind of been compromised. It is a legitimate site and you can dive really deep into it. So thinking about that, the reason I put my picture here with these 2 other pictures or 3 other pictures of what like we kind of typically think about a hacker is that we can figure out identity and personal information from just a few pieces of information. I am not a hacker, but for the purposes of this, if you've given me your name, if you've given me where you live, I can figure out your area code. And the third piece of information really is kind of like your birth date. But with this kind of information, we do what we call data mining. And so data mining is really kind of something that we don't even really think about in our daily lives. So I have a teenage daughter who totally calls me a boomer, but I'm on Facebook. That's how I connect with my friends. And so sometimes on Facebook, I pulled these directly from my site. Sometimes on Facebook, there'll be these random questions like, what scent instantly takes you back to your childhood? Or name a fish that doesn't have the letter A in it. I bet you can't, right? And you're like, oh, wait a minute, hold my morning coffee. It's trout, right? And you respond to it. If you don't know the sender who put that question out there, they now have your picture, they now have your information. Depending on your privacy settings, they can go in and data mine a lot of information from you. So I was joking in the first group today, like I didn't usually get invited to parties because I'm kind of like a buzzkill, they say, because I'm always like PSA, like make sure make sure your privacy is up to date, make sure you are secure, make sure you're not responding to people that you don't know. The other little tidbit that I will say is TikToks on phones is kind of, there's some stuff going on, but if you have TikTok on phone, that's one of the latest compromises, is that they're able to kind of like get your information from there as well. So why am I kind of talking about, this kind of data mining? This is a website and it's called Information is Beautiful. And these are the amounts of times that information has been compromised. And you'll see Facebook is on there twice for 2 different years. That's a lot of information coming at you, right? These are times when our information is being taken without us like giving permission. I like this infographic too. The one on the left is really telling. Okay, so this is the amount of data sensitivity, right? So we have email addresses, etc. You can see that Facebook has been hacked. LinkedIn has been a hot spot lately. And we don't even think about LinkedIn as maybe a social account as much as a professional. So again, like knowing who you're accepting, knowing who you're friending, knowing who you're reaching out to, that's really super important, especially with the kind of breaches that are happening. So why am I bringing all this up, right? I mean, because we can kind of introduce cybersecurity through making sure that our students are safe online. I mean, I think pretty much everybody at this point is connected somehow. And so really making sure that our information is safe and secure is really the first step. The second step, though, is really coming up with how can we make things secure? And so today I'm going to walk you through this really fabulous lesson. And we have a couple of essential questions with it. So I'll preface it with, I was at Homeland Security and now I'm still in Washington, D.C. I didn't leave. I support the Air Force at the Office of Scientific Research as a STEM education specialist. But today I'm speaking to you as a colleague. When we think about teaching cybersecurity, sometimes people think that they need to know cyber in order to be able to teach it. I disagree. I think that if you engage students in it and if you interest them in it, they will kind of take over with their own interests and they'll be able to go forward. With that being said, today's lesson, and I'll go into this a little bit later, is through Ignited Education. They are a nonprofit out of San Francisco. They have some really great curriculum. This is just one of the lessons units that's available. So I'm going to jump on in. We're going to be talking about cybersecurity and messages. So how can delicate information be communicated secretly and securely? Why is it important to transmit certain information secretly? And what are the risks and benefits of secrecy versus transparency? So I am a all on board participation type of person, right? We all, well, maybe I shouldn't say that, I'm making a generalization, taught through COVID where people were like this too. So I want to know, I want you guys to help me participate a little bit. Who can unmute themselves or put it in the chat because I can read it. What is secrecy? What do you think secrecy means? So go ahead and unmute. Anyone? Awesome. Thanks. Thanks, Carolyn. Yeah, private information. So secret would be something private. Transparency? What's transparency then? Perfect. All right. So Carolyn said public information available to anyone who wants it. Yeah, perfect. Information that should be readily available. Great. Thank you. Yeah, so we have stuff that we want to keep secret, but we also have stuff that we need to have accessible, and that's going to come into play in just a minute. Thank you for adding your answers. For time's sake, I am going to skip over this slide, but basically Oprah and Gail, again, kind of showing my age. I used to race home for 4 o'clock to watch Oprah from school. So Oprah and Gail kind of go through slang words, right? So they're looking at these words like lit, and they're trying to figure out, do they know the definition of lit? They go through a bunch of different words that are part of our common language. But slang wasn't necessarily just something that was just created. Here's some vintage slang words. These are from the 1950s, right? So I think that these are like hilarious because if I was to use the word giggle mug in a sentence, right, it means somebody who won't stop smiling. Oh my goodness. Today in my presentation, I had Carolyn, who was such a giggle mug. Would anybody in the room really know what I was talking about if you didn't know that that was like my 50s slang, right? So she wouldn't stop smiling. Okay. So vintage slang was also kind of, this has been going on for a long time. And then most recently, the Oxford University Press just said that Riz is the 2023 year word of the year. And this is a direct quote from USA Today that just kind of like cracked me up a little bit. But it said, I imagine the youth of America laughed out loud and said something like, Jeepers, Gramps, it's, I just missed it. It's totes a hip slang word for charisma, like a person's ability to attract someone with their radness, right? So when we're talking about somebody who's smooth and confident, I would say, oh, that person has crazy riz. Okay, so but why am I talking about slang and cyber security? What do you guys think? What's the connection? Oh, and I just lost my chat. Yeah, right, Monica? Perfect, right? Coded language. Thanks, Coral. Yeah, it's code, right? So I can use slang, especially in certain situations, and people aren't going to know what I'm talking about. So I want you to think about a time that you wanted to send a message to someone that was secretive, right? How did you get the message to them? So some possible examples are like a staff meeting, or if you're co-teaching, or if you're co-parenting. You can either put it in the chat or unmute yourselves. Yes, right, Carolyn? Texting while you're in Zoom. Excellent. Right. Anybody else? Yep. Oh, emojis instead of words. That's really interesting. Nobody has answered that yet. Nice, Coral. Right? Instant messaging. Right. So, last night, my daughter and I were at a party and I was playing a game with my friends and she wanted to leave. She was like totally done. So she's sending me text messages like social bandwidth done, right? Like that is only going to be between the two of us. Or if you are co-parenting, and you with your partner and something happens and you just send eye signals back and forth, or sign language, right? So there are ways to get messages to other people. So this is kind of important because we do it in our kind of personal lives, but we also are going to start to shift to think about this with national security. And times, usually we think about sending messages in secret. We sometimes think about wars or crisis. And so we're going to jump into talking about World War II, which was the biggest and deadliest war in history. And so the picture on the screen is what is called an Enigma machine. And so it was used by the German military to encrypt and encipher top secret messages. So where the troops were going to move, where the enemy troops were located, kind of, etc. So it was incredibly difficult for other nations to decode these German messages. However, there was an English mathematician and cryptanalyst named Alan Turing, along with other researchers who found the weaknesses in the code and eventually designed a machine that helped crack the most challenging of codes, being able to decipher the secret messages. Some have credited the cracking of the Enigma code as the most important victory for the Allies during World War II, allowing them to prevent many attacks. Now, the cool thing is, well, maybe it wasn't cool back then, but I think a really cool thing about it is that they still allowed some attacks to happen so that the Germans had no idea that they knew the codes, which I think is very brilliant in, making sure that they weren't onto them and that they weren't changing up how they wrote these codes. If you ever visit DC at Fort Meade up in Maryland, there's the Cryptology Museum, which is free and fabulous. They actually have the Enigma machines. They have Hitler's personal Enigma machine, but they also have the Enigma machines from World War II that you can go and see. And they're just these ginormous big machines. The Imitation Game, I believe, came out in 2014. That kind of talks about the story with the Enigma machine and how they cracked it in the group of mathematicians that they got together. If I was doing this with my students and they were a little bit older, I might not do it with my third and fourth graders. I would do it with my upper middle school students. I would say maybe fifth, sixth grade to kind of get back into history. I would show them this little video to kind of walk them through, this is what World War II, this is how they kind of developed the machine and cracked the code. It's pretty brilliant. So how would then I define, if we're thinking about the Enigma machine and we're basing it on math and algorithms and calculated rules, how would we then think about these three words when sending coded messages, right? So we want to find a connection between confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So you can either unmute yourselves or put it in the chat. How would you define these words and what they mean when sending coded messages? Did someone unmute?
Well, I was just thinking those three words, if you're going to send a message confidentially, it's only intended for one person, the person you're sending it to. Integrity, you're doing it with respect, you're doing it with meaning, you're not just doing it just for fun. And availability, the other person needs to be able to break that code. If you're sending it a code, they need to be able to receive it and read it and not to look at it going, what in the world did this person just send me?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. Exactly, right? So confidentiality is make sure the messages are kept secret and private. Then we have, control over who receives. Integrity involves making sure that it's from a trustworthy source, right? That it's free from tampering. It's also, it has to be authentic and it has to be reliable, right? So we're not just taking information from anybody. And then really, thinking about availability, you're right. Like the other person has to be able to solve it and it has to be accessible. So perfect. Thank you so much. So these words are all super important to think about when we're thinking about these coded messages. And we have some agencies today that kind of work through this, like the CIA and NSA. So this is something that you can introduce as early as second grade, right? So these are called Caesar ciphers. And Caesar ciphers, I had, when I was in the classroom, I put them on cardstock, and I had a brad, and you can kind of like make them a dial, but you can also just put them on a strip of paper. So hopefully everyone heard me ask to have a piece of paper and something to write with at the beginning. This Caesar cipher that I have on the board is sent over. Oh, I'm sorry, Marco, what did you say? Everything is sent. The information is dependent on the integrity of the packet. Excellent. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, excellent. Thank you. So this Caesar cipher is shifted 2 letters. So you'll see the top row is my normal alphabet, right? So A, B, C, blah, blah. My bottom row has been shifted 2 letters. So I'm going to start it at C. So a Caesar cipher is really super easy to kind of create with students. You can change up the letter shift to whatever you want. So it doesn't always have to be 2 letters. I've started with 2 letters because it's kind of a simple premise. But what I have done next is I'm going to ask you to solve one of my codes. So you're going to see that the bottom is how I'm going to start my code. So in my secret message, it starts with K. So I'm going to find K on my Caesar cipher. I'm going to look above it, and I'm going to see that K equals I. So I'm going to give you just a second to solve my secret code. And if you want to send it to me as a direct message, please feel free to if you've solved it. I'll give you a couple more minutes. Excellent, excellent. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Coral. Yeah. Excellent. Oh, Carolyn, did you just send one to me? Hold on to that. I'll have you share that in a minute. Thank you. Yeah, so did everyone get I have a secret? So I have a secret is my code, right? So now if you're going to do one, if you did this with your class, and if I was presenting it to my students, I would say now it's your turn to create a Caesar cipher. You have to make sure that the messages, for the intents and purposes of this workshop, like let's just do one word. And I see Carolyn has one already with 2, which is totally fine. Again, I would, because I taught a majority of my time in middle school and high school, like I would say it has to be school appropriate content and language. But also the thing is let's go ahead and just do a 2-letter shift. So with your Caesar cipher, again, you're going to have C equals A. So we'll just do the 2-letter shift. You can totally switch it up if you're doing it with your students to do more letters or do a different shift. But like I said, I usually start it with a 2-letter shift just for the students to get used to it. So if you come up with a word to decode, if you don't mind sharing it to everyone, not just a direct message to me, that would be fabulous, and we'll try to figure it out. So I'm going to actually go back one so that we all see the Caesar cipher. So here we go. So if we're all doing it on a 2-letter shift. So Carolyn put something in the chat. Nice. Ooh, what is NQTG? Louise, what's yours?
It's supposed to be love.
Oh, nice. Thank you. Lisa, what was your secret code?
Eureka.
Eureka, I love it. Have you ever been to Eureka, California? Their motto is Eureka, you found it.
Yeah.
I went to school at Humboldt State, or now Cal Poly. Carolyn, what was yours? What was your secret code?
It should have been thank you, but accessibility was an issue. I went too fast. Wrong letter at the end there. And I will also say go Jacks. Like Cal Poly. Yep, there with you guys.
Monica, what was yours? Jay.
Happy.
Happy. I love it. So this is cybersecurity, right? So for those of you who teach early elementary, is this something that you think you could put into your classrooms very simply? Yeah, nice. Excellent. So the Caesar cipher is a really great way just to kind of introduce, and we think about, we think about spies, and we think about like the importance of the breaking of the coding system, like in Germany during World War II. We don't necessarily have to talk about that with our second graders, but as we're, as we're going up in grade level, we definitely can kind of talk about it. So right, Victoria, I'm so glad that your littles would love it. So the next few slides are super language heavy, and I apologize. It's like the worst. It's like it's a participant's nightmare to have like all of this information on a slide. So I'm just going to kind of read through. How I would present this to my students is I would do a jigsaw. And so I would have certain groups read certain little pieces of information. So I've introduced you to World War II and the Germans and their encryptions, right? But these kind of secret codes went back a long time ago. So we can like go all the way back to Mary Queen of Scots, who used code to kind of keep communicating with her secretary through her secretary to her supporters. But again, they lacked the integrity and the safety, right? So they weren't as safe as she had hoped. Then we have Queen Elizabeth, who was really during the time, her safety was in question. And so really, again, like thinking about, they came up with the spy school in the 1570s. And so thinking about like, this has been going on for a long time. Another example is the Revolutionary War. So during the Revolutionary War, we had ciphers and secret codes. At the Cryptology Museum, they actually have a really old artifact. It's a round spinner cipher, and they still have it. And that's from the time of the Revolutionary War, which is amazing. That's something that old and delicate is still around. But again, there was called a culper spy ring. It wasn't necessarily a ring, which sometimes kiddos get confused, but it was like a group of people that were able to convey messages back and forth. They also used invisible ink. And so that's just a mixture of sulfur and water. And so you can write and the messages disappear. Today, we don't have to use those toxic chemicals. You can buy pens for invisible ink on Amazon, and you can have your students write and then kind of decipher the messages that way. Again, through the Revolutionary War, the other way that they conveyed messages is that they had the feather pens, and they were able to put the messages inside. They'd roll them up and put them in because the shaft of the feather is hollow. And so they were able to put that in there. So again, I'm going really quickly and I apologize. I hope people are trying to read the slides. That wasn't the point, but I wanted to show you that if I was doing this with my students, we would have, like I said, the jigsaw. Each kiddo would get, or each group would get a different time period. World War I and World War II were super important with deciphering of codes. Again, we have the Navajo code talkers. The DNA language is very complex. And so being able to use DNA, the gentleman from the tribe and from culture and knowing the language, they were able to send messages back and forth, which was really amazing. And then also how it worked, right? So how the code talkers would relay the messages back and forth. Joan Clark was actually, if you did watch the trailer for the Imitation movie, Joan Clark didn't get the credit that she was deserved. So again, going back through history, this is another time when, especially with like the Navajo Code Talkers and with Joan Clark, and we'll meet another female in just a minute, this is an opportunity for us to introduce students to people who didn't get the credit in the time that they were alive. So Joan Clark went to Cambridge. At the time that she went there, they weren't offering degrees for women. She was an instrumental part of the process of breaking the Enigma code with the other mathematicians. She didn't get the credit that was due to her. And a lot of the work that she did is still, because of the secrecy of the work that they did, we still don't know a lot of it. There is another, the woman that all spies feared was Elizabeth Friedman. Her husband actually went on, she trained her husband in how to decode. He went on to be part of the NSA. She did not. She wasn't picked up because she was a female, and they did not hire females at that time. Eventually, she did start working, but he got a lot of the credit for a lot of the work that she had done and that she had trained him to do. So again, kind of like introducing girls and underrepresented communities to kind of the STEM pipeline, like see yourselves within this. Juanita Moore, she was in Juanita Moody. She actually was really instrumental in the Cuban Missile Crisis. She was at NSA and she was an incredible code breaker. And so she was able to help out with that as well. So this unit actually starts with World War II, but then it goes into the Cuban Missile Crisis because that was another opportunity for us to decode and be able to figure out what was happening. So here is the curriculum that I just went very quickly through. We just went through lesson 1. So you'll see that this is part of the Ignited curriculum, and I can share that with you all. It's free and open sourced, and I'll share something with you in just a second. But again, the students are going to explore the history of code making and breaking through cryptanalysis. They create their own codes, which was the Caesar ciphers, and then they broke others, which we kind of did in the chat. There's lesson activities, there's lesson objectives for everything. The thing that I really appreciate about the curriculum is that it was not written by people in computer science or in cybersecurity. The curriculum was written by people who teach history and English and reading and ELA. There is a different slant to it. So one of the things that I always say is that even if you don't know cybersecurity, it should not intimidate you to teach cybersecurity. You have to engage the students. I shouldn't say have to, because that's me telling. I don't want to tell anyone, but I would encourage you to introduce your students to cybersecurity through different ways and let them take that engagement and do what they want to do with it. There's a bunch of additional resources, and I'm happy to share this slide deck. I'm going to ask Justin at the end how to do that, but I'll share my slide presentation, but this is all found within the curriculum as well, within all of the lessons. So we have additional resources. If you want to learn more about the American Indian Code Talkers or the Caesar cipher or cracking the Enigma, you can totally find that. I have another one with the origin of it. The Imitation official game trailer that we didn't watch, but it's linked. So this is the link to the cybersecurity curriculum. And it says middle school, high school, but again, we can tweak it down. Very simple to like put, as we noted earlier, we can do this with younger kids with the ciphers. Not only is there cybersecurity curriculum, but there's also curricular resources on electric vehicles and semiconductors. And I'm going to put the link in the chat in just a second. Ignited has a community of learning, and our next webinar is going to be on January 10th. And so what we do at Ignited with this project is we have a member of an industry come in and talk about what they do. And then there will be a teacher who comes in and shares a lesson that supports what the industry presents. So in November, we had one on semiconductors. So we had a professor from UCLA come in and talk about machine learning and how important machine learning is. We then had a teacher come in who teaches special ed middle school. And she has a lesson in which she models semiconductors using Legos. So it's a really great hour-long conversation amongst colleagues as to, here are some really incredible resources in industry. How do we engage students to be able to get to that point? Our one in January is going to be working on colorful dyes and sustainable dyes, because right now there's some harsh chemical things that happen with the environment. And so we have a doctor coming in to talk about some new biotech that they've created. So it's really fabulous. And I'll put that link in the chat as well. Some other things. So internet safety, I don't know if y'all know, you might, common sense education. That was, again, going back to that very beginning where we did the PSA with what kind of information do you put out there? Do you share? What's your privacy settings? Those are some really great lessons for young students for like how to be safe online. We have cyber safety videos, and that's put out through the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Careers and Studies. We have code.org does a really great lesson in cybersecurity. They also do great things for educators. And again, like I said, I'll share these slides, and so you'll have these links. We have Cyber Patriot. We have Cyber 5 Internet Safety through ABC, yeah. Ignited Education, Cybersecurity Lab, Nova Public Broadcasting Service. So a lot of additional places to get additional resources. We have clubs. So Girls Who Code is really fabulous. Black Girls Code, code.org again. And then the Air Force Association has Cyber Patriot. That's for pretty much high school. And you need some additional help with that. You'd need to have some additional mentors, but it is really a fabulous program to teach cybersecurity. And again, some conferences to go to. The NICE conference just happened at the beginning of December. They have 2 conferences a year. One is for K-12 educators. That's one that just happened in, I want to say it was in Phoenix. And then they have one in the end of the year that's for industry and for federal agencies. So that's a really great opportunity as well, the NICE conference. I think I am going to pause there for just a second, and I'm going to have you kind of choose your own adventure. So I would love it if you, oh, it says it's going to close in 27 seconds. Is that right? No. Okay. Then I'm not going to. I'm going to pause there. Does anyone have any questions?